Hi everyone, welcome back to the Pleasuring Shed. Join me here again on a rather wet and windy day. It's absolutely disgusting outside. It's blowing a hoolie and rain is hammering off my shed roof. So if you hear any background noise, I'm really sorry about that. Thank you very much for all your lovely likes and the new subscribers. Welcome to the channel. I've had some lovely comments as well, so please keep bringing your comments in. That's been really nice. But a few comments about people that are going to have a go and make some floats themselves, and that's what these videos are all about. So that's really great to see. So what we're looking at today, well, this is another Sarkanda Reed video. So after the success of the insert waggler and the antenna float, decided that we need to show some more. So today we are going to look at a stick type float, so almost like an Avon bodied float, but I'm going to call it a stick float. That's what I call it. You might want to call it something else. So we'll take a look at making one of those. And we've also got a bodied waggler. So where we've got the bulk of the body at the bottom. Some people, if they, the old school, they might have called them onion floats because they do look a bit like an onion with the bulb at the bottom. But using the Sarkanda Reed, actually, you can make these really easily. So we'll take a look at these and we'll take a look at the making them. The construction of them is actually really very simple and very similar. When you look at the Avon bodied float and the stick float, if I turn them upside down, they're pretty much identical. You just put the eye on one end and the colour tip on the other, and you've got a choice between the two floats. So we'll take a look at those and the construction of them. So yeah, that's it really. Let's crack on and take the first steps into crafting some brand new floats. Right, so let's take a look at the Sarkanda Reed that we're going to use. Different types of thicknesses. I don't know if you've bought your own Sarkanda Reed yet, but you'll realise that there's lots of different thicknesses that we can choose from. So depending on the weight that you want to make your stick float and your bodied waggler, you need to think about the thickness of the Sarkanda Reed that you're going to use. So if we use a really fat piece of Sarkanda Reed, and let's take a look at the diameter of this one, which is 7.5 mil. A short piece of that Sarkanda Reed is going to give you quite a significant weight, so you're probably looking at maybe even 4 BB, something like that, maybe even slightly heavier. And again, that will change depending on how long you cut that piece of Sarkanda Reed. Because with the bodied waggler we're only using a short section, we want a fairly thick piece of reed. This is one we've previously made. I made this earlier, so to show you what we're making. And this, just that short piece of reed there, and if we look at the diameter of that, which comes out at 7.3 mil, 7.4 mil. So yeah, quite a thick bit of reed, but that gives me a shotting weight of 3 BB and a number 4. So we need quite a substantial thickness to the reeds to begin with, because we are only using small sections of it. If we were making a straight waggler or the insert waggler, we want a thinner piece of reed because we're using much longer stretches of it, more sections of it, and that will keep the shotting weight quite high as well. With the stick float, again, this one is weighted at 2 BB, so it's slightly thinner piece of reed. But again, because we're only using small sections of it, we don't want it to be really thin. Otherwise, it will be like, 3 number 4s. If that's what you want, that's great. But bear that in mind, that the thickness of the reed that you're going to choose is going to determine the weight of the float at the end, the shotting weight of the float at the end. So I have a piece of reed here, which is 7.5 mil, and I have a piece of reed here, which is 6.5 mil. So we'll see the difference in the two shotting weights as we make the floats. So with our stretches of reed, we need to measure out the bodies. So with these bodies for both the body waggler and the stick float, the bodies are actually, look, the same length. So they're about 5.5 centimeters. That's what I've measured them out at, 5.5 centimeters. So we'll take our piece of Sarkanda Reed and we are going to measure 5.5 centimeters. And we can see the mark there. And we'll do the same with the thinner piece of reed. And we'll mark that out at 5.5 centimeters as well. Now, if you're making a batch of floats, you can mark up as many as you can get onto one piece. You probably get, where's a 30 centimeter length. So work that out, was it about 6 pieces, 6 out of one stretch. So quite good value for money. So now we are going to cut the reed. So we're going to find our razor saw. So a nice fine bladed saw we've got there. And I'm going to put it in my little miter saw block thing and cut it so that the cut is nice and straight. Cut. You've seen me do this before, so I won't go into too much detail. But yeah, remember, single strokes, just cutting away from you, slightly rotate the cane, and then just keep going round. If we drag the saw backwards and forwards, we can damage the ends of the reed, and we don't want that. So that's one piece cut. Let's do the same on the thinner piece of reed. So place it on the mark, and there we are. That's that done. Right. So the next thing we're going to need is a bamboo skewer. So ordinary bamboo skewers, get them in any kind of decent supermarket. They are literally the ones we use for food. So what we're going to do now is take the bamboo skewer and find the center of the reed. So we want to place the skewer right in the center of the reed, and then we're going to push into the reed very, very gently. Don't go ramming it in because you'll split the reed open. But the center of the reed, this fibrous material, just gives way quite easily as you push the spiky bit of the bamboo skewer into the reed. So as you push it in, just slowly pushing and twisting on the reed and the skewer, kind of in opposite directions. This is the best way I've found to do it. You can, do it your own way, but this is the best way I've found. So just pushing slightly. So we don't want to go in too far. What we're going to do then is take it out, and we're going to do the same at the other end. And then what we're going to do then is actually push it all the way through. So rather than doing it all the way through from one end, I find making a hole at one end, going in about halfway, and then working from the other side just stops the cane from splitting. So very, very carefully, very, very gently pushing it through, and eventually you'll feel a little bit of give, and there we are. You can see the cane has come out the other end. And if you look, that is fairly central. If the camera picks that up. So that's it. So that's what we've done there. All right, so we're going to do the same now with the thicker piece. So same thing, pushing the cane into the center. I find the thicker pieces of cane tend to give a little bit easier. So again, just slowly pushing in. Saying that, I'll probably split it now. Just slowly rotating both the cane and the Sarkanda Reed. About halfway again, come out and go in on the other end. Just keep working that in until eventually you'll just feel it give slightly. I think we're about there. There we are. And it pops out the other end. So again, you can see we're nicely in the center. So we've got a straight cane all the way through the Sarkanda Reed there. So I'm going to leave that on there now. And what I want to do is just bring it right down to the end. So because the next part is to taper off these edges. That's the next part of the build, is to taper off the edges. Now I'm going to use my little bandsaw that I've got there. And to hold this small section next to the bandsaw is a little bit tricky. So by holding it through on the cane, I've got a little bit more to hold on to. So here we are on the bandsaw. Let's switch it on. It's not the bandsaw even, the belt sander. Get it right. I wish I had a bandsaw. I haven't got one. It's a bit noisy, so sorry. Here we go. So you can see the little end piece sticking out, and you can see I can just holding it on, and I'm going to slowly rotate it just to bevel that end. I do love this little belt sander, but it really is quite noisy. Okay, so that end's done. Now I'm going to just push the paint all the way up the other end and repeat the process. And there we are, that's done at both ends. So I'll repeat the process now with the thinner piece of Sarkanda Reed, and yeah, join me in a second. Okay, so the next question we got to ask is, which of these do we want for the stick float and which do we want for the Bodied Waggler? So my choice is I'm going to go for the slightly thicker reed to make the Bodied Waggler and the slightly thinner reed to make the stick float. The other question we need to ask is, how do we want the float to look at the top? So we've already got a spiky bit at the top. Now, some people like their tips to really sort of feather off to just a fine point. Other people like the thickness of the stem all the way up to the top of the float, the coloured bit. It's your choice. So I am going to cut the spike off. I don't really want the spike, or I can work from this end. So the foot of the float, so this part of the float, we're going to have that at about 3 centimeters. So we're going to start to work on the Bodied Waggler to start off with. So we want that bottom section there, where we're going to whip the eye on at the bottom. We want that to be about 3 centimeters. So I'm going to measure that and mark it. So we'll put the thinner one to one side for the stick float, and we'll focus on the thicker piece of reed for the Bodied Waggler. I'm just going to move that up, find my ruler and my pencil, and mark 3 centimeters. So that's marked. Now I'm going to pop a little bit of super glue just on the bamboo skewer there, and then I'm going to slide the reed down to my 3 centimeter marker. So get your super glue. We don't really want a lot of super glue. You hardly need any, just the tiniest little bit, little tiny blob, and then smooth it in. Use the tip of the pot of the super glue just to rub it down. And then as you slide it up, don't pull it in one direction, twist it as you're sliding it, and then that kind of helps the glue move all the way around the reed on the inside, so we get a good covering and it sticks nice and fast. So right up to the little marker line there, and there we are. Don't worry if you can still see your pencil line, because we're going to whip over the top of that. So that's done, and the next decision we need to make, so many decisions, is how long of a stem do we have at the top. Bear in mind, this is the bit that's going to be sticking up out of the water that you're going to see. So let's make a decision. Well, I've already made it because we made this one earlier. So let's measure that. It is 10 centimeters. So on my Bodied Waggler, I want to mark from the base of the reed there, or top of the reed, depending on where you're looking at it from the top of the reed there, where the reed meets the bamboo skewer. That's where I put it to 0, and I'm going to mark 10 centimeters. There we are. And then I'm going to cut off this section. So using my side cutters to snip off that section. Don't throw that away. That'll come in handy for something, even if it's just for stirring a pot of paint. So I'll put that in my little jar there. And there we are. There is pretty much the skeleton of the Bodied Waggler. So we're going to whip the eye onto the bottom, which I'll show you how to do in a minute. And I'm going to get to use a new tool. I'm so excited. So we're going to whip the eye on the bottom of there, and then we will whip up onto the Sarkanda Reed. We'll make that all look nice and pretty, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do with the rest. I'll do that in a minute, because now we're going to move over to the stick float. So this is the Bodied Waggler. I hope I'm not confusing you flicking between the two floats, but this is the Bodied Waggler. And all we're doing, look, there's the basis of it. So it's the same process to make the stick float as it is to make the Bodied Waggler. You just need to think about the length of the float that you want, and the length of the coloured tip that you want. You can make yours quite long or quite short. Again, it's completely your choice. So based on the float that I've already made, we want the tip section. Let me just measure that. That is going to be 3.5 centimeters for that colored tip. So I want 3.5 centimeters. And then the bottom section is going to be 8 centimeters. So 3.5 for the colored tip and then 8 centimeters for the stem at the bottom. So let's get that measured and glued, and then we can start the construction. So where's my pencil? There it is. So we want to mark 3.5 centimeters. So 3.5. And again, exactly like I did with the Bodied Waggler, I'm going to put a little smear of glue on there and then twist and slide it up to the marker. So a little bit of glue. Tiny little blob is all you need. Once the blob's on there, just kind of squidge it around. And remember, as you're moving the Sarkanda Reed up to the marker, to twist it. So just twist it as you go, all the way up to your 3.5 centimeter marker. There we are. Now that's only been on there for what, 5 seconds, and that's stuck, completely stuck. So another reason why I twist it as I go is it stops it from grabbing hold of the reed too quickly. So now I want to measure what will be the foot of the float, the leg of the float, however, whatever you want to call it. And I measured that to be 8 centimeters. That's what I want it to be. Again, your choice. You can go shorter or longer. I think 8's about right. So let's mark that at 8 centimeters. And we're going to use the side cutters to cut that off. Again, don't throw away your scraps. They'll come in handy. If you're making more floats, you can use them as leg pieces, or if you're doing the insert wagglers, you've got your insert there. So don't throw these scraps away because they will come in handy for something. So there we are. That's the body or the skeleton of our stick float. So putting the two together, you can see the construction is almost identical. The thing that's going to change them now is when we start adding details. So that's what we're going to do now. So we've got our Bodied Waggler. That's what we're going to work on now, the Bodied Waggler. The end where we snipped off with the side cutters is a bit rough, and that's going to be the top of the float where we put the coloured tip. So we just want to smooth that off and make that nice. And then the bottom, which is where we're going to whip on the little eyelet, we just want to flatten off the two sides there to help the little safety pin when we whip onto that. So we're going to use our old faithful sanding block, and I'm just going to just round off that end. As I'm rubbing it backwards and forwards, I'm also twisting it. I could do this on my belt sander, but I just wanted to go back and show you that you don't need a belt sander, but you can do it on a little sanding block. So there we are, that's almost there. So good. I don't know if you can see that. I'm just rounding it off, and so it's not such a jaggedy point. Then with the bottom end, I'm going to flatten one side. So I'm just going to go backwards and forwards until it's nice and flat. That's one side done. And then on the dead opposite side, just do the other side. There we are. So we've got a nice flat surface there. I'm just going to do the edges a little bit, just so it helps the safety pin. Remember, when you're doing your dusting, whether it's on a block or on the belt sander, it does create a lot of dust. So if you do have the old, a bit of an awkward lung condition or something, wear a mask. Good. Okay, so let's put a little split in the end of the foot there, and we will whip on an eye. We're starting to get into the finer detail now, so glasses are going on, I'm afraid. Next job is to cut the end off our safety pin. I've shown you this before in previous videos. There's our safety pin, and we're just going to snip off the end with our side cutters. There we are. And there is our eyelet, which we're now going to whip on to the end of our Bodied Waggler. So first of all, we need to use our sharp knife, and we're going to make a little split in the end of the bamboo cane, the bit that the end that we flattened. And we're just going to put a little split in there by pushing down with your knife. There we are. And then into that little split, we are going to put our thread. So I'm just going for a plain black thread this time, no fancy colours or anything like that. So into that little gap, into that little split, and push it in, pull it in. Come on, in you go. Here is it. I can't find my crack. Where did I put my crack? There it is, and we're in. Okay, so you can see a bit of thread going through into the crack there, into the split. I'm just going to burn that off with my lighter. And then squash it down with my finger so it's nice and flat. Now, this is the exciting bit. Now I get to use my new tool. I'm so excited. So excited. I can't believe I've got this far without this tool. So I'm going to hold my little eyelet on there like that. Here it comes, everybody. Are you ready? Look at that. Isn't that superb? That little peg. And what that little peg does is I just clip it on there over the legs of the little safety pin. Ah, hands free. Awesome. Yeah, sorry. It's a bit silly really, but yeah, what a game changer. Love it. So pick the pegs out. I think I've got them in some craft shop somewhere. I saw them. I thought, oh, perfect. So there we are. So that little peg there, look, just holds, if you can see that, it holds the legs of the safety pin clamped against the bamboo skewer, and it just allows me, it just gives me a little bit more freedom when I start the whipping. So that's really cool. So here we go. Remember, we're going to go under and over the top. So we'll start off nice and close to the bottom by the peg and just slowly rotating. Try and keep the whipping fairly tight together. This first pass doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to whip back over the top. And again, you've seen this in lots of my previous videos, I hope. If you haven't, you know what I'm going to say next. They're all available on YouTube. Go check them out. So we keep whipping, spinning it around. So all I'm doing is holding the thread in my right hand and slowly rotating the float in my left hand. And that's pulling the thread onto the stem. When I get down to the actual eye, the hole, I'm just going to change the angle slightly and the whipping will start to move back up in the opposite direction, back up towards the peg. And we keep going. I'm just going to pull off a little bit more thread. Keep going. So now the peg's going to be in the way, obviously. So I need to just hold it between my fingers. So don't let go of that thread. Keep the tension on it, otherwise it all unwinds. Take the peg off. Put it somewhere where you're not going to lose it. And carry on whipping. So I was playing around with some whipping designs, really, sort of different styles and different patterns. And I've come up with a style that I actually quite like, and I've been using it a lot on some of the floats that I sell on eBay. And so I'll show you that now, and you can see whether you like it or not. It's just a basic spiral whip, but it's just a little bit different. So we're onto the stem now. So we've come off the legs of the eyelet. So what I do is I start off, just change the angle a very, very tiny bit. Let me just put it to one side to see if you can see it. And we start a basic spiral, but the threads as we first start it are quite tight together. And then as I coming up the stem, I slightly change the angle so they become wider. And as I go up the stem, continuing to get wider, changing that angle, So you get like this kind of widening spiral. And then when you get to the top, straighten up, square off, and start to rotate again. So you get that band just before we whip up onto the Sarkanda Reed itself. Now, pull off a bit of extra thread. Before we whip onto the Sarkanda Reed, just remember that this inner area of the Sarkanda Reed is really quite soft. So be careful, don't put loads of pressure on it, because you'll end up cutting the thread into the sort of soft pulpy bit of the reed and you'll ruin it. So slight pressure, but please be a little bit more careful as you start to go up onto that soft pulpy area. So just keep that pressure there and keep rotating. Takes a bit of time, takes a bit of practice, if I'm honest with you. You know, in the past when I've been making them, I've got quite frustrated that the threads would slip. But, you know, it's just practice. It's keeping a constant pressure and just practice, practice, practice. I've made hundreds of floats, probably thousands of floats by now. But I still class myself as an amateur. But there we are. So we've come up the beveled edge and we're now onto the actual flat edge of the Sarkanda Reed now. So I'm not going to go too far up the stem. So we'll hold it there. I'm going to clamp it under my finger. Let go of the other end of the thread. Don't let go of this finger. Remember that. And I'm going to find my loop of thread or fishing line. I'm going underneath the black thread. I'm going to clamp it under my thumb. It's all a bit fingers and thumbs, sorry. Pull it in so it's secured. And then whip over the top of the fishing line. And I'm going to go around 4 times. Make sure it's all nice and neat. So that's 3. 1 more for luck. 4. So there we are. Now I need to clamp it under my finger again. I can let go of my right hand, find my scissors, snip off the tag end, and with that tag end, I'm going to pass it through the loop. So that's through the fishing line loop, and then I'm going to pull the loop underneath the thread that I've whipped over the top of it, and then that pulls the tag end through as well. Put your loop away so you don't lose it. With a little tug, make sure it's all nice and neat. And there we are. That's our whip done. So all that remains for me to do is just snip off this tag end. So we need to find our sharp knife. So scalpel, razor blade, that sort of thing. Place it under there and let the blade do the work. Make sure that's all squashed up and nice and neat. Now, just a little thing. This is something else. I'm really not sure if the camera's going to pick this up, but I don't know if you can see where I've snipped it off. There's a little tiny bit of fluffy bits, like a rough cut end. Yeah, can you see that? I hope you can. Don't worry. What we can't do is kind of get scissors in and do, you know, snip it off like that. But there is a trick. And we take our lighter again. Now, when we light the lighter, don't hold it underneath the float and all the whipping that you've done, because it will just burn. But all we're going to do is hold a bit of heat next to that little fluffy bit, and it's just going to cinch it down. So here we go. Let's try it. I hope you can see it. Boom, done. That's it. You saw how quick that was, and that's gone. Look, it's completely gone. I don't know if you can see that. All right. So little tip there. Good. So that's whipped on, and we're going to repeat exactly the same process. No, we're not actually, are we? Because we're making the stick float. So we're going to do it slightly different. So we're going to whip the eye on in the same way at the bottom. But we're going to look at a little bit more decorative whipping on the foot of the float here. So let's take a look at that next. So moving over to the stick float, remember the short end on this one is going to be our coloured tip. So I've just rounded that off, just like I did on the other one. So I've rounded that off, and then on the foot end, so the long end of the stick float, I've flattened that off, ready to take the eyelet, and I've put a little split in there as well. So just find me crack, and I'm going to put the little bit of thread into the crack, into the split. Come on, in you go. Oh, just need to widen it perhaps. That's being a bit of a pain. There we go, we're in. So it's in there, and we're just going to burn off that tag end and then squish it down. So that's in. Find my little eyelet, and I'm going to place it onto the end, and I'm going to get my new whipping tool. Oh, it's so cool. I so love this peg. Honestly, you have no idea how much easier it makes it. There. Right, so we're going to begin the whipping again. So let's try and get it onto camera a little bit better this time. So again, we're going round and underneath. So there we go. Start slowly rotating. Hope you can see that. So it's the same process as what I did on the first one. So maybe with the magic of technology, we might even be able to fast forward this bit. I go in super quick time, who knows? I'll leave that to my amazing camera operator and editor, Ali. She might be able to work some magic with that. So I can take the peg off now and continue whipping. Just holding the thread in one hand and slowly rotating the float in the other. So all the way up the legs of the eyelet. So I want to do a bit more decorative whipping. So now we've got the base of it done, I want to do a bit more decorative whipping. So I'm going to whip out probably to about halfway up the stem, and I'm going to use that same spiral technique that I did on the base of the Bodied Waggler, but I got a bit more space to play with, so I can really extend it up. So let's just have a little play with that. So you can see, to begin with, I'm going to change the angle very, very small amount, just so the spiral is still really quite tight. Only a small gap between the threads. And then gradually, as I spin the float, as I twist it between my fingers and rotate it, I'm just changing the angle of the thread, and that makes that spiral kind of unwind and get bigger. So there we are, and then we're going to square it off and make a nice band at the top. Now you could, if you wanted to, continue that whipping right the way up and onto the shaft. But that's, again, entirely up to you. So I'm going to make a little band there. And then we need to finish it off now. So with clamping it under my finger, I'm going to get my little bit of fishing line, tuck it underneath the thread, pinch it in, and then I'm going to whip round there 3 more times. So 1, 2, 3. Clamp it under the finger, find your scissors, snip off the tag end, and pass the tag end through the loop. And then pass the loop, pull the loop back under the thread. There we are. That away so I don't lose it. Oh, there we go. Right, so that's whipped on there. So that's done, and I'm going to get my knife and just snip off tag end. So just let the knife rest against the thread and just pull it gently. No pressure on that at all. That knife is nice and sharp. So that's that bit done. Now we need to turn our attentions to just whipping up onto here. Like I said, you could have continued that whipping all the way up and onto the Sarkanda Reed itself, but I want to just keep mine there, and that's just my design style. So I'm going to start a new whip. So I'm going to find my piece of thread. So a slightly different start to this whipping. Again, you've seen me do it before. So I'm going to clamp this end of the thread underneath my thumb now, and I'm just starting somewhere along the shaft of the bamboo skewer there. Just clamp that under my thumb, and then I am going to go underneath and over the top. And then as I keep rotating, I am going to whip over the top of the thread. This is going a bit wrong. Over the top of the thread that I am holding under my thumb. There we are. And that's clamped under there now. So hopefully you can see as I go round that that's clamped that in place. So I need to hold it there, move that out of the way. I'm going to snip off this tag end. So sharp knife right to the edge and cut that off. Didn't cut it in one. There it goes. And we're going to continue whipping. So this is going to be a solid band of whipping now, going right up onto the shaft of the Sarkanda Reed. Again, when you get onto that sort of beveled edge there, the Sarkanda Reed, the pulpy bit, just remember, please don't put too much pressure on, because you'll cut into that and it will ruin the look of the whipping. So next job is to tie it off. So we need our loop again. We've got our loop and we're going to place it under the thread. Sorry, my hands are in the way. Clamp it down and we'll do 4 more rotations on there. 2 isn't quite enough. 3 is okay. 4 for sure. So that's 2, 3, 4. So scissors, cut your tag end and pass that tag end through the loop and pull the loop under the thread that you've whipped. There we are. And put your loop away so you don't lose it. Make sure that all is nice and neat. And let's slice off that tag end. We don't need that anymore. There we are. Now I've done it again. I've got a little bit of fluff on there. I don't know if you can see that little bit of fluff there. So we're just going to get rid of that with the lighter. Whoop, gone. So there we are. So there's our stick float and our bodied waggler. We're almost there. So what I'm going to do now is put a coat of Rustin's clear varnish over the whipping that I've already done. I'm going to leave those to dry. Having that coat of varnish on there just bonds it and seals it, and we can then handle the floats a little bit more easily without that whipping coming undone. So that's what I'm going to do now, and I'll show you what they look like when I've done it. So the varnish has gone dry. Again, it just gives a nice bonding on that whipping there, so I can handle it quite freely now and not have any fear of it unraveling and spoiling all the hard work that we've done. The next job is to paint the tip. So I've already painted this tip white because it's fairly straightforward. We don't need to measure it. The whole tip's going to be white because that's our base color. So I use the Revel Matte number 5 on there, and I've painted that white, and that's gone nice and dry. We'll come back to the stick float in a minute. But with the Bodied Waggler, I haven't painted it yet because we need to make another decision. And the decision is, how much of the float do we want to paint? For some of you, you might just want to paint maybe a centimetre at the top, so that when you're fishing, you just have that tiny little bit picked out of the water. Some of you might want a long section of paint, a bit like we did with the antenna float. The choice is yours. I'm going to go with about a 5 centimetre band of colour. If we look at the float that we made earlier, this is my pre-made one. So yeah, so about a 5 centimetre band of colour, and then I'm going to split that into strips of colour. So let's get that measured and I'll show you what I do, the stages of painting it. So let's put that back up there. So we need my ruler again and my pencil. And I'm going to mark a 5 centimetre marker on there. And I know that needs to be painted white because that's my base coat. So the white coat just makes the yellow pop, and the reds pop if you're painting it red as well. Again, you can have it all one color. You can put smaller, thinner bands of color on it. The choices are yours. So we get that one painted white as well. So by the magic of television, here's one I made earlier. So we can see we've got that section painted white now. So I haven't done any more whipping yet. The whipping will come later. So white section at the top. Once that's dry, we'll move on and paint it yellow. And for the yellow, I'm using Revell's satin matte, silk matte number 312. It's a nice high vis yellow, silk matte 312. And let that dry. Maybe 2 coats on there. Again, your choice. So 2 coats of the yellow on there, and that's going to dry. And then onto the yellow, we're going to paint our bands. So I've measured, what is that? That's 2.5 centimeters, so about an inch of the top color. So the color at the top, then a band of yellow, and then another band of red at the bottom. So each of those are 1.5 centimeters. All right. So, yeah, does that make that 6 centimeters then? Yeah, there we go. The band of colors are your choice. You can also, here's another one I've made, and it's still in the process of making, switch it around so you can have a yellow top with a red band in the middle and then a yellow bottom. Again, the choice is yours. So let your imagination run wild. Get that back on the peg. So we've got our bands of color, and the next job is to tidy up these bands of color by adding some more decorative whipping. So that's what I'll do next. I'll add some whipping, and then we'll move on and we'll take a look at the stick float again. So the red paint that I've put on there has gone off, just so if you're curious about it. The red is, again, it's a Revell paint, and it is SM332. So that's Silk Matte 332 on the Revell. So that's gone off nice and dry. Remember, when you're going to whip onto your enamel paints, do let them go off for a few hours, probably 4 or 5 hours, so they go really nice and hard. If they're a bit too soft, then the thread is going to cut into that paint, and you'll end up with splodges and bulges of paint over your thread, and it won't look very nice. So the whipping technique is the same as we did to start on the stick float. So that bit there. So we will find the end. We're going to, where's the end? There's the end. We're going to start off at the join between the long section and the bit of where it joins the yellow. So I'm going to place my thumbnail and clamp that thread underneath there, just on the line. When we start whipping, we're going to start whipping just into the red, and then we're going to whip down into the yellow. I'm only putting a thin band of black on, and that thin band of whipping will cover the join, the sort of the messy join between the two colors. So let's do that. Let's whip round over the top, and going over the top of the thread that I'm holding under my thumb. Again, this is a bit fiddly, but practice makes perfect. The more you do it, the easier it will get, the better you'll get at it. So that's all nice and secure now. So I want to snip off that tag end. So using the sharp knife, snip off the tag end. And then we're going to continue whipping. Now, remember, we only want a thin band. So I only want maybe another 1 or 2 rotations just to get that band. So what I'm going to do now is change the angle quite sharply to whip through the yellow. What I don't want is loads of black thread inside the yellow and completely covers the yellow. I won't be able to see it. So I've changed the angle so it's hardly any thread whipping through. And again, changing the angle again to square off. And I'm going to place on there another band of whipping to just cover the join from the yellow into the red. There we are. And then I'm going to change the angle again and whip down through the red and make a nice thick band at the bottom as well. The band at the bottom can be a little bit thicker if you want, just to kind of represent that's where the end of it is. So clamp it under your finger, let go of the thread, find your loop of fishing line. Just out of interest, if you are interested, this little loop of fishing line, it's just cheap fishing line that I've got, and it's £8 line. There we are, in case you were wondering. It's about right for what with the thickness that we need. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. If it's too thin or too weak, then it just snaps when you try and pull it through. So we'll do 3 rotations, and there we are. That's that done. Find my scissors, snip off, and pass the tag end through the loop, and pull the loop back under the whipping. There we are. So that's that done. So you can see we've got the separation between the colours. So I'm just going to snip off now this tag end. So find my sharp blade. Boom, done. So that's it. So that's that bit. So my next job is to just whip over the top of this, and I'm going to do it in exactly the same technique as we did with the no, wrong float. Where is it? Yeah, that one. That's that one, isn't it? So yeah, so the same technique as I did with that, where I started on the stem and whipped up onto the shaft. That's exactly the same technique as I'm going to use on there. So you've already seen that, so I'm not going to show it to you again. But yeah, clamp it under your thumb, underneath, and then whip up onto the shaft, and then tie it off with your loop of fishing line. And it should look, when you're done, something like this. There we are. So I've given that another coat of the Rustin's quick drying varnish, and that's gone off now as well. So that's all ready now for shotting. So we're just going to pause there and go back to the stick float. So a stick float is dry of varnish. So that had a coat of varnish. I painted the tip white, as I've already showed you on the video previously. You can just paint the whole thing white. We haven't got to measure it, so that's all done. So once that white has gone off, we're then going to give it a coat of the yellow. So here's one that I made earlier, and I've given it a coat of yellow because I thought I'm always making red tip floats. Let's make a yellow tip float. So I've given it a coat of yellow, and I've given it a little red base color there. The next job to do once this is all dried is to whip just to cover the line between the two joins, the color of the paints there. You don't have to, of course. You can leave it like that. It works like that, fine. I would recommend that you whip over the top of this soft pulpy area though, just for strength more than anything else. So again, I'm not going to show you how to do that because I've kind of shown you already. It's exactly the same method as whipping onto the top there. It's the same method that we used for the Bodied Waggler we're going to use for the stick float. So start on the just above the line, clamping it under your thumb, and then whipping down. Put a little spiral, if you like, through the red. Let me show you on one I've done. So there we are. So it should look something like that. So you can see the band there separating the two colors. You can just see a little bit of the red, and then we've whipped onto the Sarkanda Reed body. So there we are. So that's done. And what I've done also with this one is giving it a coat of that Rustin's clear quick drying varnish. And now this one is ready to be shotted. So that's the job we've got to do next. So we've got our Bodied Waggler and our stick float almost ready to go fishing with. It's just the shotting weight we're going to do, and we've got to varnish it. So let's take a look at the shotting. So let's go back to the Bodied Waggler, and we're going to shot it now. So based on what I've made before, I'm estimating, or guesstimating, probably closer, that's going to be around 4 BB. So let's take a look. So I've got 3 BB already on the line. So let's thread that through the eyelet. You can get it through the eyelet. There we are. And I'm going to hold that in place with one more BB shot. So we have 4 BB on there at the moment. So let's get that in the jar and see what happens. Well, clearly it's too heavy. That's fine. Let's take off one of the BBs and see where we are from there. We'll take off the bottom one. Let's see now. Okay, that's a bit better. As you can see, and I hope you can see, that it is just sitting about halfway into the yellow. For me personally, that's a little bit too much sticking out of the water. I want that to sit down on that top black line. So it's a very, very fine bit of adjustment now. So I'm going to go for a number 6. Now, I'm not a big fan of number 6s because I always drop them because they're so blooming small. So let's try putting on a number 6. Try and squeeze it between my fingers. Oh, there we are. Got it first time. How about that? Right. So as you can see, we've now down to 3 BB and a number 6. So let's see what happens. Wow, that looks pretty good to me. Just move it to the edge so you can see it. And we're right on that line. So that, for me, that's perfect. Now, I can take that number 6 off. So if I was using a slightly heavier bait, like a, I don't know, piece of prawn or something like that, or a bit of a worm, that number 6 can be taken off because that's going to adjust the height of the float sticking in and out of the water. So there's a little bit of play there. So that's a positive thing. So that one's done. So 3 BB and the number 6. So we'll get that written on in a minute. So remember that for me. Okay, 3 BB and a number 6. So we'll get that dried off, and then we'll measure the stick float. So the reed about the same size, slightly thinner on the stick float, but we'll see. So let's go with 3 BB again and see what happens. And I'm going to leave that number 6 on there just for fun. So where's that 3rd BB? Clamp that in place. So again, I've gone 3 BB and a number 6. Hope you can see that. So let's get that in the jar and see where we are. Okay, now that's sitting just a little bit too low for my liking. So I'm going to take off that number 6 because I think that is going to be the adjustment to bring it up on the line for me. So let's remove that number 6 and let's try that again. Pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I've got a nice clear bit of colour sticking out of the water. I've got 3 BB shotting weight, which is actually quite a nice weight to fish with. Sensitive on the bite. The float settles very quickly. You see it bobbing down and then settles back quickly. So we've got a lovely sensitive float there on 3 BB. So I'm very happy with that. So we'll get that dried off, and then we're going to write on the shotting weight. You remember what the first one was? Have you forgotten already? Shocking. Right. So 3 BB on the stick float, 3 BB and the number 6 on the Bodied Waggler. So I'll get that written on and then we'll get it varnished. I have written on here the Black Bottom Floats brand name, and I have written on the shotting weight. Now these were the floats that we made earlier, so the shotting weights are slightly different to the ones we've just measured in the tank. So on the Bodied Waggler, we've got a shotting weight on this one of 3 BB and a number 4. So that's good. And on this float, again, we've got a slightly different shotting weight again of 2 BB and a number 1. So it was just lighter than the other float, but still a nice weight for the float itself. So that's it. The floats are finished. I've given them a coat of yacht varnish, and they've been drying for a couple of weeks now. So these are all done, and well, we know what the next thing to do is. Take them down the lake and see if we can catch a fish with both of them. Double challenge. Let's see how we get on. See you at the lake.